These are Cumberland Island's feral horses, abandoned, domesticated animals that are struggling to survive. There is not enough food or fresh water and no veterinary care, so these animals are left to suffer in a false representation of freedom and a governing body that will not help.
The horses aren't good for the island, and the island isn't good for the horses.
In April of 2023, Cumberland's horses, naturalists, and other equine groups filed a lawsuit against the state of Georgia and the National Park Service. More than a year and a half passed, with lengthy time extensions and motions to dismiss the suit. The horses endured one of the hottest, driest summers on record, forcing advocates to file an emergency injunction to provide the animals with food and water. The defendants refused to consider this request. In November of 2024, the lawsuit was dismissed. The court agreed on these facts. The horses are suffering, and the horses' activities on the island are adversely affecting the island's natural resources. But because the Park Service has taken no action in the past 30 years, means they can't be responsible for not taking action now. The closing statements on this case are perplexing.
Plaintiffs have plausibly argued that the National Park Service should take steps to protect and manage Cumberland Island's feral horse population, not only for the well-being of the horses, but also to preserve the island's ecosystem and its endangered species. While this case must be dismissed, the court hopes that the important issues plaintiffs have raised here might spur the National Park Service or other agencies to act.
But isn't that the whole reason for the lawsuit? For some action? Members of the public, horse advocacy groups, and conservation organizations have asked, pushed, and begged the agency to develop a solution for decades. It's the right thing to do. It's hard to believe the National Park Service would want these animals and our ecosystems to suffer. They should share our desire to address problems caused by non-native, feral species and ensure that Cumberland Island remains undeveloped and protected for future generations. Horse management problems are an issue across our country. In the West, native vegetation is being trampled or eaten to excess, leading to severe erosion in the biocrust. At Assateague Island National Seashore on the East Coast, a feral horse management strategy was implemented in 1994. The National Park Service treats the majority of its female population there with contraceptives, which has been successful in reducing the size of the population. Interestingly, the Assateague herd is co-managed by the National Park Service and through a special use permit from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. That's right, 2 federal agencies are working together to manage a feral horse population. Theodore Roosevelt National Park in North Dakota also performed an environmental assessment that noted the horse herd there has the potential to trample or overgraze vegetation used by native wildlife species, contribute to erosion and soil-related impacts, and compete for food and water resources. Very similar to the situation on Cumberland Island. Their initial proposal supported the removal of almost 200 horses, but based on public feedback, the final plan will allow for a healthy herd of wild horses to be maintained and preserve the park's natural resources. Ignoring the basic needs of food and water for Cumberland Island's horse population is inhumane. In Georgia, a conviction for cruelty to animals is punishable by up to 1 year in jail and a fine of up to $1,000. But the horses on Cumberland Island endure malnutrition, diseases, injuries, and are deprived of a normal life expectancy without any repercussion. The next steps center around the question, what do we do now? Doing nothing may be legal, but it is unethical and immoral. The horses continue to suffer, and the island continues to degrade, all for a misguided romantic vision. The Park Service's mission is to preserve natural resources for future generations. The National Park Service's blatant refusal to address the suffering of these animals and their impact, or their own responsibility to protect Cumberland Island and its wilderness, has wasted an exorbitant amount of private and public money and resources. The cruelty on Cumberland Island will continue unless the Park Service acknowledges that they can and should take responsibility to preserve and protect one of the largest remaining undeveloped islands on the East Coast for future generations, along with all of the species that live there. For more about Wild Cumberland, visit wildcumberland.org, learn about our efforts, the history of the island, hear about current developments through our podcast, and join us or donate to continue this vital mission. We are a 501c3, completely volunteer organization and are solely funded by individual donations.